were taught to believe in something, that if you work hard enough, if you play by the rules, stay humble, stay loyal, stay late, that someday, somehow, life will reward you. You believed that effort was a currency, that pain had a purpose, that struggle, if endured long enough, would eventually open the right doors. But something doesn't add up, does it? Because year after year, you kept showing up. You put in the hours. You said yes when you were tired. You sacrificed time, health, family, identity. And what did you get? More expectations, more pressure, more silence. The promotion went to someone else. The raise never came. The people you outworked are the ones who now give you orders. Meanwhile, the ones who knew when to stop, the ones who never ran themselves into the ground, they seem to be doing just fine. Not because they worked harder than you, but because they understood something you didn't. So let's pause for a second. Because maybe the problem isn't that you weren't enough. Maybe the problem is the story you were handed. The story that told you good things come to those who grind. That hard work always pays off. That success is just a matter of time. But what if that story was never written for you? What if it was designed to keep you occupied, obedient, exhausted? What if it was meant to make you believe that your suffering had meaning, so you'd keep suffering and never ask who's really benefiting? You see, the lie is subtle. It doesn't tell you not to dream. It just ties your dreams to a machine that eats your time and gives you hope in return. Hope that if you just keep going a little longer, if you just stay good, stay busy, stay small, then someday the system will notice and reward you. But what if I told you the system doesn't reward effort, it rewards usefulness? And usefulness is not measured by how hard you work, but by how easy you are to control. You believed you were playing a fair game, but no one told you the rules were rigged. You weren't lazy, you weren't stupid, you were loyal to a system that only values loyalty when it's silent. So here's the question. Was your failure your fault, or were you just never meant to win by playing their game? Because maybe the goal was never to succeed. Maybe the goal was to keep you too tired to question the goal itself. And if that's true, then maybe it's time to stop chasing their rewards and start asking a much deeper question. What if hard work was never the answer? Because the real game was never about working harder, but about waking up. You were told hard work is good, that being productive makes you worthy, that staying late, saying yes, being dependable, these are things that make you valuable. But no one ever told you to ask, valuable to who? They taught you that laziness is a sin, that rest is weakness, that stillness should make you feel guilty. But why? Who benefits when you feel bad for stopping? Who wins when your worth is measured by how much you can burn each day? You've been conditioned to confuse effort with virtue, to believe that being tired is some kind of badge of honor, that exhaustion is nobility. But let's be honest, there's nothing noble about being used. This is where Friedrich Nietzsche steps in, and he doesn't whisper, he calls it what it is: slave morality, a system of values designed not by the free, but by the controlled. A morality that glorifies obedience, that teaches you to obey, submit, endure, and call it good. Nietzsche said, "The virtues of the weak were invented by the weak to protect themselves from the strong." In other words, the system doesn't want you free. It wants you manageable, predictable, small. And what better way to control someone than to make them believe that their own suffering is holy? You weren't taught to ask why. You were taught to endure. You were not trained to question the purpose of your labor. You were trained to take pride in how much you could sacrifice for it. But let me ask you this: if hard work is truly sacred, then why do those who labor the hardest always seem to die with the least? Why are the ones who sweat the most paid the least? Why does the system reward visibility over value, conformity over creativity, obedience over originality? because it was never about hard work. It was about useful compliance. The system doesn't need thinkers, it needs gears. And here's the darkest part. It convinced you that the more useful you are, the more human you become. But Nietzsche would say, no, that's not humanity, that's domestication. And the tragedy, most people don't even realize they've surrendered, because the surrender looks like success, looks like discipline, looks like achievement. But deep down, you can feel it, the silence, the emptiness, the quiet erosion of your soul. Because working without pause isn't a triumph. It's a symptom of a spirit that's been trained to forget itself. And maybe that's the point. Maybe they never wanted you to rise. Maybe they just wanted you busy enough not to notice you've stopped being alive. Now, here's the part no one told you. The part that doesn't live in systems or society, but inside you. Because let's be honest, you're not just working for money. You're not just staying busy to survive. You're moving like a man who's running from something, but you don't know what. You say you're ambitious. You say you're dedicated. But underneath all that, there's a fear. The fear of being seen as worthless, as lazy, as disposable. You keep pushing because you believe, if I just try hard enough, I'll finally be enough. Enough to be respected, enough to be loved, enough to stop apologizing for existing. But here's the truth. You're trying to fix a fracture that was never yours to begin with. You were told your value depends on output. You were taught to earn your right to be here. So now, you don't rest. You don't slow down, because stopping feels like disappearing. And this is where Carl Jung steps in. Jung believed that every person carries a shadow, the parts of ourselves we reject, suppress, and fear. The shame, the weakness, the need. And the more you deny it, the louder it drives you. That's what you're doing, isn't it? You're not working from inspiration. You're working from compensation, trying to prove you're not broken because somewhere deep down you believe you are. Trying to become someone because you were never told you're already someone. You don't love the work. You fear what happens if you stop doing it. And so you keep moving faster, harder, longer, not to succeed, but to escape. Jung said, hard work without soul is not ambition. It's avoidance. You're not living, you're running. And here's the worst part. The world calls that dedication, but your nervous system calls it something else. Exhaustion, disconnection, collapse. You don't need another goal. You don't need another to-do list. You need to stop and look at what you've been avoiding. The part of you that feels small. The part of you that's tired of pretending. The part of you that's done. Because until you face that shadow, you'll keep trying to buy back your worth with effort, and no amount of overwork will ever make you whole. So maybe the next step isn't to push harder. Maybe it's to listen. Listen to the fatigue, the silence, the emptiness that shows up when the noise stops. Because that's not failure. That's the voice of your soul, finally asking to come home. By now, maybe you've started to see it. This exhaustion you carry, this quiet fear of slowing down, this belief that if you just worked a little harder, you'd finally make it. That's not personal failure, that's programming. Because here's the truth no one wants to admit. This isn't a broken system. This is a very well-functioning machine. And its purpose is not to free you, it's to use you. It's not that the system forgot to reward you, it's that you were never supposed to win in the first place. Like a narcissist gaslighting their partner, the system manipulates you into doubting your own reality. You're tired? That's just weakness. You're unfulfilled? Maybe you're not trying hard enough. You feel like something's wrong? That's just your laziness talking. It flips the script. Until you stop asking if the system is broken and start asking if you are. And that's how it wins. Because now, instead of walking away, you work harder, you dig deeper, you sacrifice more, and the more it hurts, the more you cling to it. This is what psychologists call trauma bonding. The deeper the wound, the tighter the loyalty. You confuse pain with purpose. You think if it's hard, it must be meaningful. You think if it's exhausting, it must be noble. But that's the lie. Pain doesn't always mean progress. Sometimes pain is just pain. A signal that something is wrong. Not with you, but with the place you've been told to stay. See, the system doesn't need you to succeed. It just needs you to keep hoping that you might. That's the trap. Hope is the leash. They feed it to you in just the right doses. A little praise, a small raise, a vague promise of next time. It's not enough to set you free, but just enough to keep you coming back, because you're not lazy, you're loyal. Loyal to a game that rewards visibility, not value. Compliance, not creativity. Silence, not truth. And the harder you work to win that game, the more you lose yourself in it. Until one day, you forget. You weren't born to compete. You were born to create. But they never wanted you creative. They wanted you busy. Busy enough not to think. Busy enough not to feel. Busy enough to forget that your worth was never meant to be earned at all. And here's the punchline. Hard work won't set you free. It was never meant to. Hard work makes you more productive, not more powerful, more compliant, not more conscious. Because in this system, effort doesn't equal freedom. Effort equals submission. So maybe it's time to stop asking how to win the game and start asking, why are you still playing a game you were never meant to win? So here we are. You've seen the illusion. You've felt the cost. And now you're standing at the edge of something terrifying. The question, if I stop playing their game, who do I become? Because this isn't just about quitting a job, or setting boundaries, or taking a vacation to feel alive again. This is about unlearning a worldview, unwiring the belief that your value comes from being useful to something that doesn't love you. And that's not easy, because for years you've measured your worth by how well you performed in a rigged game. So what happens when you stop? Who are you without the pressure, without the scoreboard, without the need to prove you belong? This is where Nietzsche returns, not to comfort you, but to challenge you with a brutal kind of honesty. He said, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. In other words, don't break their rules just to rebel. Write your own rules. Redefine the terms of your existence. Stop trying to be picked. Stop begging to be seen. Start building value so undeniable that you no longer need permission to exist. You don't need to be accepted. You need to be real. But becoming real, that requires something deeper than rejection, louder than resistance, longer than motivation. It requires integration. This is where Carl Jung speaks. He called it individuation, the lifelong journey of stitching yourself back together. Shadow and light, persona and self, expectation and truth, not destroying one another, but learning to hold them all. Because most people don't live as themselves. They live as reactions, as masks, as roles designed to be liked, not lived. They work not from purpose, but from fear, not from presence, but from programming. Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who your boss wants, not who your parents hoped for, not who society rewards. You. So no, this is not about quitting your job. It's about no longer doing it like a puppet dancing for scraps. It's not about burning everything down. It's about waking up inside your own life and realizing it's always been yours. Choosing what you say yes to. Choosing how you show up. Choosing to act from alignment, not from obligation. You don't need to work less. You need to work from a different center. A center that doesn't need to be rescued. From a place that's whole. That's aware, that's done apologizing for existing. Done begging for validation. Because once you remember who you are, once you stop trying to be useful and start becoming true, they can no longer own you. And that's when the real work begins. The kind of work that doesn't exhaust you, it expands you. The kind of work that doesn't ask for your soul, it's born from it. The kind of work that makes you dangerous, because now you're no longer trying to survive the system. You're building something beyond it. So where do you go from here? You've seen the illusion, you've felt the burn. You've realized that trying harder inside a broken system doesn't make you free. It just makes you tired. So now what? You don't need a 5-year plan. You don't need to uproot your life overnight. You don't need to disappear into the woods and write poetry under the stars. You just need to pause, stop, and ask yourself one honest question. Who am I doing this for? Not the surface answer, not the scripted response you've repeated for years, but the raw truth underneath. Whose validation are you still chasing? Whose approval still controls your choices? Who are you trying to become, and why? Because if the answer isn't grounded in you, it's time to start pulling your soul back from where you've outsourced it. Start small, start quiet. Do one thing today, just one, that doesn't need to be seen, doesn't need to be posted, doesn't need to be monetized or applauded. Something just for you. A walk without your phone, a sentence you write and don't share, a decision you make without asking for permission. Not to prove anything, but to remember that you're still in there. Because every time you do something real, something you chose without the system's approval, you reclaim a piece of yourself. That's how freedom begins. Not with rebellion, not with explosions, but with quiet clarity. Not with burning bridges, but by building your own ground to stand on. And maybe the most radical act of all is to stop performing. To stop waiting for someone to say, okay, you've done enough. You may rest now. Because that moment, it's never coming. The world isn't going to give you permission to stop. You have to give it to yourself. So stop running in circles. Stop chasing the invisible finish line. And instead, turn inward. Choose your work like it matters. Say no like your time has value. Build slowly. Live deeply, and never confuse exhaustion for accomplishment again. You don't have to burn down the cage. Just stop calling it home. Because once you stop believing that suffering is a badge, once you stop begging for meaning in a game that feeds on your confusion, you'll realize something simple, something powerful, something you always knew. You were never here to be chosen. You were here to choose. And this moment right now is where that begins. Let's be clear. This isn't about working less, it's about seeing more. You don't need to abandon discipline, you need to abandon distortion. Because the real problem was never effort, it was direction, it was intention, it was believing that if you bled enough, you'd finally be seen. But what if you stopped asking the world to recognize you? What if you turned that energy inward and used it to recognize yourself? Because the truth is this, you don't need to become more, you need to become yours. And that changes everything. You stop chasing validation, you start building alignment, you stop waiting for applause, you start listening for silence, you stop being a product and start being a presence. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because once you do that, you can no longer be controlled by promises, guilt, or reward. You move differently, you create differently, you live from the inside out, not from fear, not from programming, but from truth." And Nietzsche, he would remind you, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But here's the part we forget. That why must be your own, not inherited, not imposed, not manufactured, your own. So no, you don't need to succeed by someone else's standards. You need to stay loyal, fiercely loyal, to the deepest version of who you are becoming. Because the world will keep asking for more hours, more output, more compromise. But you no longer owe it your exhaustion. Let it ask, let it wait, let it wonder why you're no longer dancing for its approval. You've remembered something powerful, something quiet, something untouchable. You were never meant to prove your worth. And once you stop trying to earn it, you begin to express it. That's the shift. That's when you stop working and start creating. That's when your labor becomes legacy, not just effort, but essence. That's when you're no longer a tool, but a force. So no, don't try harder to please a world that profits from your self-doubt. Stop and begin living like someone who has nothing left to prove, because that's the moment you're finally free.